Well, good morning, YouTube. So today the plan is gonna finish the brake job on Project X. Yeah, you guys saw the last time we worked on it, we put on the stainless steel brake lines and bled the system, and I still wasn't happy with the braking performance. Still had a caliper that was hanging up. So I bought brand new calipers from Summit Racing a couple days ago, and they just arrived in the mail yesterday. However, Project X hasn't been started in quite some time. You know, that's not completely true because Talon moved it on property a couple of weeks ago, but he probably didn't let it run very long. I think he just moved it from one spot to another. So he didn't say he had to jump start it then, but today when I tried it, the battery was low enough, it turned slow. So right now I've got the Dooley hooked to it and running at high idle to try to charge those batteries up so that I can start it and move it over to the shop so we can get to work on it. You know, on top of the batteries being a little bit low on charge, it was really cold here last night too. Got down to about 17 or 19 degrees. Now it's currently still pretty chilly, but it's about 11 o'clock in the morning now. When I got up at 7:30, I looked and it was still like 21 degrees, and I just didn't feel like coming out here and dealing with it in that cold, so I figured I'd wait till it warmed up a little. So currently it's in like the mid 40s. I think the high today is only gonna be 48. But look, the sun is shining, the skies are clear. It's actually a beautiful day. You know, I got a long sleeve shirt on, but it's not anything heavy by any means, and I'm perfectly comfortable out here. All right, guys, so we're gonna give that 10 or 15 minutes or so, and then we're gonna go ahead and give it a try and see if we can get it to fire up. So stay tuned, we'll see if it works. All right, guys, so I'm just gonna give you a quick glance of what we are going to be installing on the Excursion today. I decided to go with a power stop system. So it is brake rotors, calipers, caliper brackets, new pads, the whole 9 yards. Now I didn't order them all as one kit. The calipers were out of stock. So I've actually had these rotors sitting here in the shop for a couple of months now, since right after you saw that last video of doing the brake lines. Then the calipers finally got back in stock, and they arrived yesterday. One of the reasons this project's taking so long, but let me show you what we got. All right, guys, as you can see, all 4 rotors. There's front passenger side, driver side, and then the rear driver side, passenger side. I opted to go with the extreme severe duty truck and tow brake pads because it is a diesel truck and I do tow trailers. And the calipers came with all new hardware, new slide bushings, which I don't think I need because the calipers also have them. And I opted for the powder coated red brake calipers. I did this because we do have some salt on the roads up here in the winter, and I wanted it to look better and last longer and not get so rusty. The rotors themselves, you can see, have slots and the drilled holes in them, which is what they recommended for an upgrade for the towing package. And as you can see, I ordered it from Summit Racing Equipment. I've been using Summit for years, not sponsored or anything, just built a lot of hot rod cars and stuff in the past, and they've always been my go-to to get parts for a decent price. and they were the best price option that I found on this power stop kit. So that's where I chose to order it from. So let's get this stuff installed and see how well it works. I do have one concern though. On the front calipers, they clearly have different part numbers. That was this 5304. This one here, and it'll be upside down, 5103. And you can see the way I have them orientated. Pistons are on the outside. Bleeder screw would be to the top as if this were the front of the vehicle. And again here, bleeder screw at the top. So these would mount on the vehicle like so. Pretty self-explanatory. However, on the rears, I notice there's a number stamped into both of them. They're both the same exact part number. They're the same exact caliper. They don't seem to have a left and right designation, which concerns me unless one of them mounts rearward on the axle and the other one were to mount forward on the axle. That might work. Now, I honestly don't recall how this calipers are orientated on the back of this truck. I have done the rear brakes on this truck before, but it's been quite some time, so I just don't recall. And I know that when doing the lookup guide on this, there was a front mounted rear caliper or a rear mounted rear caliper, and it turned out that they were the same exact part number. So this may be right. We won't know until we take the wheels off. Well guys, definitely a bit of a cold start there in the Excursion, but she's running, everything looks good, so I'm gonna let it warm up for a moment, and then I'll get it moved over by the shop. All right guys, so we got the X moved over here next to the shop. Yeah, we're gonna do this project outside today, only because to make things efficient, what I'd like to do is get all four wheels up off the ground, take off all four wheels at the same time. That way at each position, I can spend a little bit less time and I can have the brake system open for a shorter period of time. I'm gonna preload the pads on the calipers and all that stuff so that it's literally 2 bolts, and then the line comes off and I can take the entire caliper off of it, pull the rotor off, slide the new one on, put it all back together nice and quick. That's the game plan. Hopefully everything works out well. And the truth is I just can't fit the Excursion in the shop and have enough room to work around all 4 corners of it. I can either do the front or I can do the rear, but once I get the whole truck in there, there just isn't any room to work. I definitely need a bigger shop. All right guys, as you can see, I've got all 4 wheels up in the air and the wheels removed. And yeah, that left front brake caliper is definitely stuck. When I was moving the Excursion from the yard over here by the shop, I could feel that the caliper dragging. I wasn't sure which one it was, but I knew that something was trying to hold it back. And once I got it up in the air, that's the only one that I cannot spin freely by hand. And I got to make a correction. When I was looking at these calipers earlier, I had mentioned pistons out and having the bleeder up. In my mind, I was thinking motorcycles. In most motorcycles, 2 piston calipers like in a Harley, the pistons are on the outside of the caliper, not the inside. Cars, completely opposite. Like this, the pistons would go towards inboard side, and then when they're mounted, the bleeder screw would be at the top. So this is the orientation they will actually fit on the vehicle. However, I was correct about the rear. So the right rear, that works fine. Calipers inboard, bleeder at the top. On this one, if the caliper is inboard, the bleeder is at the bottom. So these 2 calipers are identical. when they should be mirrored. Now you can see they've got the embossment here where they could have drilled it to put a bleeder here or there. So the caliper itself is probably the same, but it's not drilled with the bleeder and seat. So I'm gonna have to call tech and see if they can get me a new one out here quick. Okay guys, I was correct. One of those calipers was wrong. They're gonna have to send me a new one. So we're gonna go ahead and do the other three now, and I'll just swap out that last one when the correct parts arrive in the mail. But because this is Thanksgiving week, we just may not see that till after the holiday. So I've disconnected the 3 brake lines, and I took out the 2 fasteners that hold the caliper and caliper bracket assembly to the spindles and the rear end housing. Of course, the rear one, the caliper just fell off. The front ones are still sitting in place, so we're gonna get those pulled off, and then we'll wash up so their hands aren't dirty, and we'll start assembling the new stuff. As you can see, that one doesn't want to free up either. All right, so let's see if we can just take the whole thing off as an assembly, since that caliper does not want to slide off of that rotor. Well, it almost worked. Go get a pry bar. Two down, 1 to go. All right guys, as you can see, I got the caliper and the rotor off, but that caliper is still stuck to the rotor. It does not want to come off. And the same thing has happened over here. While it was still on, I was using that pry bar, and that's as much as I could get it off, and that was at least enough to get it to clear the actual flange. So I was able to get it off of the truck. I don't know how I'm going to get it off of the rotor, because I still have to send those calipers back for a core. All right guys, so now I'm going to take all the mounting hardware for all 3 of those calipers. I'm going to clean them up on the wire wheel and put a little anti-seize on the thread, so that when I do put them back together, everything should go back together nice and smooth, and everything will be clean. All right guys, as you can see, all the bolts cleaned up pretty good. So now I'm going to put a dab of anti-seize on each one of those to help protect everything as it goes back together. And then we're going to get to assembling these calipers. All right guys, that anti-seize is applied to the threads. You see I did it down towards the base of the threads. That way, as you begin to thread it in, it will work its way through the threads. You don't have to coat the whole bolt. In fact, that's probably more than what you really need, but it doesn't take a lot. All right, we're also going to use some silicone caliper lube on the back of the pads. Now, we probably don't need to. These little plates that are on here are an anti-squeal backing plate that they put on there, but it doesn't hurt to add a little bit of silicone just as an extra precautionary measure. So that's what we're going to do. Again, just a very light coat. Really only needed to be where the piston is actually going to be in contact with the brake pad. And then I like to do just a little bit on the edges here, where it's going to slide into the grooves. That'll eliminate any brake noise that is unnecessary and unwanted. Well guys, my wife knew it was cold out here, so she just brought me some soup out to warm me up. Very thoughtful of her. But I also want to take note, the silicone that's on those brake pads, make sure you don't get it on the actual friction side of the brake pad, because it will affect braking performance. So you want to be careful. Don't be sloppy with it. A little dab, wipe it around very carefully. Just pay attention to what you're doing. All right, so I'm going to eat my soup, and then we'll get these calipers loaded up and finish the job. All right, guys, when loading the brake pads into the caliper bracket, it's much easier to remove the caliper from it. That we can load the pads in and get the springs in place. If you try to do this as an assembly when it's all together, it's virtually impossible to get those spring clips in there. I'm sure it can be done, but you're going to fight yourself, and it's so much easier to just take the 2 bolts out and do it this way. All right, guys, my 3 calipers are now loaded with the pads. All of the mounting hardware from the caliper to the caliper bracket has been torqued. That way we don't have to worry about that on the truck. The pads are spread apart, so it should be as easy as throwing the rotors on, putting the caliper bracket assembly on, bolting it down, hooking up the hoses. Now, some brake rotors come with a like an oil residue on them to keep them from rusting. I don't think these do, but I'm going to go ahead and hit them with some brake cleaner first just to make sure. That way there's no oil residue that gets between the actual friction surfaces between the pad and the rotor itself. All right, guys, and there you can see the assembly in the rear. Brake lines all hooked back up. Nice pretty caliper, nice pretty rotor. All right, so now we just got to do the same thing to the front. And there is the passenger side front. All right, just one more to do. And all right, guys, there we go. All 3 are now done. All right, guys, now I still need to go through and bleed the brakes, and I'm not going to show you that in this video because if you remember in part 1 of this where we did the brake line kit, I had already showed you my trick on how to bleed brakes. So we're not going to be redundant here. Now this particular truck works really, really good if you just let them gravity feed. So the system's pretty much empty now because we've had it open long enough. I'm going to fill it up with Amsoil DOT 3 and 4 brake fluid, and I will crack the rear bleeder, let all the air come out, and it will slowly fill that up. And then once all said and done, we'll just do a couple final pumps to top it all off. All right, guys, as you can see here, air bubbles are slowing down or almost stopped, but you can see the level of the fluid actually rising in the tube. That means the gravity feed part of it is almost finished. Now remember, I'm doing this by myself. So right now I've just got the master cylinder full of fluid. I've got the hose on the bleeder. It's cracked the bleeder loose, and I just stand here and do nothing, and I watch it happen. It's one of the easiest way to bleed brakes. Doesn't always work, but when it does work, it makes it so much easier. Well, guys, it's almost 5 o'clock, and it's going to get dark on me pretty quick here. You know, this whole daylight savings thing still gets me sometimes. All the wheels are back on, but the truck is still up on the jacks. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up all my tools and take care of all my used parts, get them stowed away inside, get the truck off the jacks, and take it for a drive before the sun sets. And feeling pretty good. I went through and checked everything. Spins nice and free, so I don't think there's going to be any issue. But I thought that the last time too, and it didn't take long for one caliper started hanging up. But like I said, with the whole hydraulic system disconnected, those calipers are still stuck to those rotors. They're not even on the truck, and they're locked on there. So that was definitely a problem. These new calipers should not do that. So let's get this finished up. We take it for a ride. right, guys, I just got back from taking it for a test drive and everything seems to be working well. So we're going to call that the end of this video. But I tell you what, feels good being able to drive that truck again. It's been a good long time. Those of you that have been following might remember that we started having trouble with that truck back in February. Back when Talon and I took our very first load for North American Van Lines, we were using the Excursion to get around down in Atlanta. And that's when the brakes started locking up on us and not working right. And we decided to go ahead and come home. And that's when the radiator started leaking. Actually, it wasn't the radiator, but there was a coolant hose that started to leak. And I repaired that back over the summer. And then, you know, of course, I tried the brake lines a little bit later on. But it felt really good to drive the truck around for a little bit. Really, since February, I've only run a couple small errands with it because I knew it wasn't right. And then it just got to a point where I couldn't drive it at all anymore. So everything seems good now. So I'm looking forward to putting some miles on it here in the near future. Well, guys, I really hope you enjoyed that. Starting to get really cold out here now that the sun has set. So I'm going to gather my things, close up the shop, and head inside where it's nice and warm. And so thank you for watching. And until the next time I see you, keep those engines running.